Hey everyone, welcome to our 30th online beer tasting. We are doing West Coast IPAs and a bit of a history. To my incredible delight, I actually got to do trying to pin down what the very first West Coast IPA I would. Now, for context, I turned 18 and started working here. So, those keeping track, yes, I've been here 20 years. Yeah, it doesn't feel like 2 decades, but yeah, that's a milestone. I want to talk a little bit about what the beer scene like 20. We've broadly had a similar amount of shelf space, which seems absolutely nuts to consider, but we set up completely. As you may or may not know, if you've been in the store, we have 7 doors, 2 on the left and 5 on the right. In the earliest days, the 2 on the left were all of our craft beer. The 5 on the right were just, Molson and Bats and all of that sort of. I think a little bit of the Big Rock might have been in, but at that point it was just really boring. The other 2 doors were our craft beer section, which included craft beers like Lehman's, and Guinness, and Corona. Like it was really, really lame. But it was the year 2000. They're really market. Wild Rose was out by then. They got started in '96. But Wild Rose, really get from them. Get like Bombers, and they were giant 750 ml swing cage bottles. And we could get Unibrew exclusively again in Bombers. So if you came in looking for craft beer in a 6-pack, really know if I could think of a single craft beer. Like I can remember like Henry Weinhard's on the shelf, but it was really shockingly bad. The only breweries that were operating in Alberta in 2000 would have been Rock and Outcat and Wild Rose was only. It was a wild time. Audio's really spotty. Apparently cutting in and out. Yeah. We know why? Good on our end. Let us know if that's getting bad. But anyway, things really changed, at least for us here, in about 2000. That's when we started to uptick IPAs or West Coast IPAs in terms of what people were asking for. And then from there, we started to notice that beer turned over faster and was actually available to be fresh all the time. And a very tiny percentage of it was. This was long before we got Deschutes, long before we got Sierra Nevada. This was before like the 2010 explosion of like every single Montana craft brewery having 6 different beers listed in Alberta. It's quite possible I'm swearing too much. That might be it. I haven't even cracked the first beer. Let's start there, actually. I want to say a big thank you to Darcy, who's the rep for Red Racer, and I phoned him and asked him what year Red Racer first came to Alberta, and he told me 2017, which, as I assume all of you watching know, is wildly incorrect. So thank you, Darcy. You were worse than useless. So let's start off with discussing what a West Coast IPA is as we get into this one. We heard you say something about turning 18 and then it was really bad. Well, yeah, Craig, things were a little better 5 years ago, but they weren't great. It's getting better. Good. We're not sure exactly what's going on. Aaron's been running all over the place, checking every wire on the audio system. We're hoping it's getting better. But yes, let's talk about what a West Coast IPA is. West Coast IPAs come out of the very early 1980s. They were first kind of brewed at the New Albion Brewing Company, which didn't last very long, as well as you could make a case for Anchor's Liberty Ale as also being really the first West Coast IPA. From there, it really became like a Northern California staple with breweries like Russian River, Lagunitas, Bear Republic, and then into Washington State and Oregon with breweries like Rogue, Pike's Place Market Brewing, and then on and on. It just absolutely snowballed. Sierra Nevada, of course, got onto it very early, and it just went off from there. For Canada, at least, for us, IPAs, when I first started here, as I said, we maybe head bombers of Wild Rose at best. Otherwise, Tree Hophead is really the first one I want to talk about, because that's really the first one that I can remember being a big deal for us. And I can actually remember way back to doing a craft beer event. And it was this small brewery from BC that everyone was really excited about. And we were doing it on the patio of Mocha Cabana. I think literally the very first summer they opened. And we were doing it with myself and Steve Tebow. And we did this Canada Day outdoor beer tasting. And it was like Hophead, Thirsty Beaver, Cutthroat. I don't even think Mellow Moon Pineapple Heffa was a thing back then. But it was this like Canada Day beer tasting in the middle of the afternoon. We got like 25 people for it. And it was just this huge deal. And from then on, like the IPA that I relied on as being always available, always turned over so it was actually fresh, because oh wow, in the bad old days, you didn't get like properly refrigerated IPAs. That was not a thing. Connect literally didn't even have cold storage until about 2008, 2010. So if you were buying IPA, it was room temperature. When did I actually start carrying Red Racer? Now, I had to think about this. Central City, I went to the website. They say they got their start in 2003. And I remember hearing about Red Racer for a couple of years before it actually came out. So I'm going to pin down 2005-ish would be the year that it actually came out here. So that would have been the very first year. Apparently, Nigel just brought in a sign that said 2015, not 2017. So I'm way off on that. I feel like this has been around, I feel like I remember this being around longer than it actually has been. So, Tree became the default IPA, but we'd all heard of Red Racer. Finally came here in, I still don't know if I believe 2015. I feel like it's earlier than that, but if Nigel said it, then it must be true. And this really became, after that, the default IPA for me and for really everyone else around, because it was just consistent, it was delicious, it was always available, it was always good. Came in a mixed 12-pack with a couple of other IPAs. They had an IPA, an ISA, and a Pale Ale. It was just, if you wanted hops, you wanted it at a fair price, and you wanted it to be really, really good, it was this. Also, there's no way that was 2015. It has to be earlier than that. So, what's so different about this versus some of the other West Coast or hybrid styles that we've had? Like let's just say the Wave Pool IPA by 88, because that's kind of become a bit of a reference IPA. I would say over the last 12 months, there's really no IPA I've had more than that one. It's the one I'm most familiar with. One thing you notice right away is how dark this is in color. They've got a lot of heavy, resiny, sticky bitterness going on in this beer that has to be balanced out with some sweetness. And how you add the sweetness to the mash bill is by using caramelized malts. Once the sugar has been caramelized through heat, creating what we call caramel or crystal malt, it actually is very, very difficult to ferment. So if you add simple sugars to the beer, they'll just turn into alcohol. But complex sugars, like caramelized malts, they will actually continue to add sweetness to the beer right on through the brewing process and into the final product. So that's why this beer is a little darker, is because the beer is also a little more bitter. And the other thing I want to point out is this is, a fairly simple beer these days. There's a reason that it hasn't shown up yet in our tasting lineups. Compared to some of the stuff we're going to get to later, like the Seasons Pass, it always feels a little bit basic. But I can remember when this actually came out, it was an absolute revolution. People were losing their minds that finally Red Racer was available, and it was a thing that they could get and a thing that they could drink all the time. Yeah, it wasn't the hop box, because that was Phillips mixed IPA box. I'm trying to remember what the heck they called that thing. There was a mixed IPA box from Central City. And yeah, it wasn't a hot box, it was something else. If anyone remembers, please let me know. But yeah, pine, citrus, grapefruit. you're going to be using a lot of Cascade, Centennial, Chinook. This is very much the base recipe upon which every other West Coast IPA has kind of been built on top of. Possibly some Citra. I was going to say Citra. Yeah, it does have that old school hop flavor, an old school hop aroma, doesn't it? I really like that about it. So this comes into the Alberta market, and I swear earlier than 2015, has to be. This is going to be a contentious point as long as we stick with this beer as the timeline. But this comes out, and all of a sudden there's a IPA line. Hilariously, they actually launched with like a lager and a wheat ale, and I think a pilsner, a couple other things too, and just no one cared, which was the funniest thing. But yeah, they launch with these IPAs. They immediately get really big. They immediately start selling like absolute gangbusters. They launch a coolers line a couple of years later that goes absolutely nowhere. And then, yeah, they stay really, really strong for a while, and then they kind of fall off. And they fall off right about the time Fat Tug comes into the market. And whereas I heard a little bit of buzz for a while before Red Racer came out, wow, was everybody in Western Canada talking about Fat Tug like it was the second coming of every type of brewing. It's the second coming of Vinny Chilurzo. So, oh, did I leave out Centennial? I swear I said Centennial, but I also sometimes forget that you're all on a 30-second delay, so you probably hadn't even seen that by the time you posted your comment. So Fat Tug IPA, this is by Driftwood Brewing. Driftwood was founded in the late 2000s, I believe 2008. 2010-ish was when they did their really, really big expansion and doubled the size of the brew house. And I believe we actually got Fat Tug a little bit after that. Just like Red Racer, when it first came out, it was bombers only. They finally rolled out with the 4-pack cans about 2 years ago. And this really was a beer that, you know, we would actually get 2 or 3 phone calls a week for years before this finally came to Alberta, just asking, oh, do you have Fat Tug? It's like, no, we really wish we did. If anyone remembers Cassandra, who worked here years and years ago, I used to get like a box from Cassandra about once every 6 months with like half a dozen to a dozen bottles of Fat Tug just for my own drinking, because I couldn't get it and I didn't really want to drive. I can remember driving to Fernie to buy Fat Tug at the is it the BCLDB? Yes, the BCLDB, the BC liquor stores. And like just walking in, assuming of course they're a BC liquor store, of course they'll have Fat Tug. And then very quickly it dawning on me that I'd wasted my time driving to Fernie because I absolutely was not going to leave with any Fat Tug, because for the liquor stores at the time it was a special order item. Now, in terms of timeline, there's at least 5 years between these beers. I would say probably more like 8. And also, I feel like this recipe has very much remained unchanged, and maybe Fat Tug has shifted a little tiny bit. But from here we go from this intense, powerful, chunky, big beer, something that's immediately just so much lighter. This is one of those, I could have one, maybe 2, and let me be clear, I can remember when I could sit down and have like 8 of these, no problem. Watching a hockey game with all my friends, and I'm not driving anywhere, yes, just I will drink this all day. Now that almost feels like too much beer for me. This, on the other hand, it's so light, it's so pretty, it's so refreshing, and this is still, like, when we get to the cabin, this is going to seem like a really big IPA. It's going to seem positively old-fashioned. But it's such a giant step up in terms of how beer changed over time. There's absolutely still a home for Red Racer IPA. Make no mistake, I will still buy Red Racer. But it's a bit of a time capsule, and I love it for that. How are we sounding there, Aaron?
Good.
Sounding good? Good. Am I making any sense at all?
cannot comment.
Not a bit. Good. Awesome. Now on this, I start to pick up some of the prettier stuff. Tangerine, kumquat, really pretty citrus. Definitely something in pineapple. But one thing that you'll notice between this and the Fat Tug, the Fat Tug is, I think, quite a bit drier. It's less bitter, but it's a lot drier. And the other thing I noticed is it's a good deal drier than a lot of East Coast or New England IPAs. One of the reasons that I've been really kind of hoping that West Coast would make a bit of a return is some of those East Coast IPAs are starting to get really, really bloody sweet. Ooh, Justin, Red Racer has had good beer advent calendars. Well, let's put a pin in that idea, just till we get through the Rainhard here. We might have something to talk about with that. But yes, they really did. Oh, Aaron's ruined everything.
I need a drink of this. I just need a drink.
Am I surprised that these classic recipes are still selling strong? I will say unquestionably they have slowed down. Red Racer IPA definitely still sells enough to justify a shelf spot. But I can remember like Red Racer 12 packs just of the IPA. Like we had 12 packs of IPA, 12 packs of like the mixed pack of IPAs, and then just 12 packs of their session ale. And I can remember like having to keep a par of like 12 to 15 of all of them. And then slowly dialing back and dialing back and dialing back over time. But I can remember having to keep just an insane par on these things. And they did do a Advent in combination with Parallel 49. And then they did their, I can't remember if they did it with Parallel 49 first and then they each did their own, or if they each did their own first and then they did them together. Basically, none of the breweries did an Advent calendar this year at all, which is very, very sad. Spoiler warning, we're making our own Advent calendar. That's the big announcement tonight. We'll get to that in a minute. Oh, I wanted to talk about it, Aaron.
Real cute lead up there.
Sorry. I'm not good at that. Shut up, Aaron.
All right.
And you're right, it doesn't have the caramel malts. It's a lot lighter, it's a lot drier, it's a lot cleaner. And it's a lot more sessionable. Like, I find I could drink a lot more of this. Yeah, that's absolutely still spot on. Okay.
This weirdo.
We're up. Rainhard. This is a brewery I discovered when I talked to Morgan Rattray after our Two Crows tasting. She's the one who introduced me to Rainhard. They are out of York, Ontario. And this is their Armed in Citra dry hopped pale ale, which again is nice and clear, nicely bitter. I'm bad at surprises. I'm quite bad at surprises. I'm terrible at surprises. The only person who asks their wife what they want for their birthday. Yep, it's reasonable. Yep, that's totally fair. I am crap at surprises. Now this is a little tiny bit hazy, but I did actually do quite a bit of digging around, and this is considered a West Coast IPA. Although I will say, I think this might be like the Wave Pool, and this might be a little bit more of a hybrid because, well, that was gross. Coming out of the Red Racer and out of the Fat Tug, I get peaches and pears and nectarines. Sorry, Aaron's absolutely dying over here. Help me understand what makes West Coast Best Coast. Well, you completely derailed my train of thought.
Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg is what makes the West Coast the Best Coast? That is, that's fair.
Right?
Yep, okay, yep. From a beer perspective, I think it's because it is a little bit underdone these days. It's the style of IPA that really did give us modern IPA. It's got so much potential. You can do so many different things with it. And East Coast IPA, I don't know. I'm just kind of past it now. I mean, I was really excited when Blind Man New England came out, and it was like impossible to get, and it was so cool, and everybody was just like losing their minds for it. And then we, like 88 and Cabin, and to a lesser extent Establishment, really did build their early reputation on their New England IPAs. And you can even make the same argument for Annex's hoppy beers. I think most of them would fit very comfortably in that East Coast style, particularly Force Majeure. But I don't know. When somebody says, oh, by the way, we have a New England IPA, I'm like, oh, good, you're only 18 months late to the party. Congratulations. Whereas when somebody says, oh, we've got a West Coast IPA because, that now you've got my attention. Now I'm very interested. I'm always interested in styles that, people aren't working with but want to work with. I think my very favorite beer I might have had on this entire 30-week journey we've been on is the Left My Wallet in El Segundo. A, because I didn't get the reference, and B, because I actually didn't know the style. I didn't know that there was a lightly smoky, occasionally fruit-infused sour from Germany. Also, it was delicious, but I don't know, as much as I like teaching these things, and as much as this is really just a collection of follies and me being an idiot, I do actually try to impart some information as well. But yeah, I really loved learning on that. And when people are just saying, okay, well, this is our East Coast IPA, it's like, okay, cool. What makes yours different? It's not a style that takes desperately well to fruit flavors because it's already so fruity. It's not something that I've seen a lot of like really intense variations on other than just hop variations, which can be very, very good, don't get me wrong, but it's still an IPA. You're expected to change up the hops. When you're kind of going back now and saying, well, we're not going to do that, we're going to go a West Coast IPA, it's like, okay, A, why? And B, what are you doing different? What have brewers learned from the East Coast IPA explosion that's going to transfer over to the West Coast? And that's where we're starting to see these hybrid IPAs. Wavepool would be a really good example, and just based on nosing of this, I'm going to guess that the Rainhard Armed and Citra is going to fit pretty comfortably in that hybrid style. What if we had a beer that had a little more bitterness, a little more dryness, but also had some of that tropical fruit prettiness that we get from the East Coast? Did not like Fat Tug. Time zones, Sunday. Let's do a proper East versus West. I agree. I would like to actually get back to that again and do something better with that. Okay, Scotty, why didn't you like Fat Tug? What's wrong with Fat Tug? There are certain hops in here that for people who are very sensitive to them can taste a little bit onion skinny, but I really liked Fat Tug. Come on, Scotty. Tell me what you don't like. I don't think we want Kyle on camera for 8 beers. I don't want me on camera for 8 beers. More than one host, just yes. All right, folks, that's my 4 beers. I'm going to lay down in the corner and have a nap. And Craig's going to come in. It's going to be great. Okay, so Rainhard got their start in 2015. They're out of York, Ontario. This is actually the only beer I've ever tasted from Rainhard. I brought it in purely on the recommendation of Morgan at, I forget the name of her agency. Yeah, she actually recommended it and said that if you like West Coast styles, you'd really like this, so I went with it. I'd say this is more hybrid than West, especially with that amount of haze, but I really like the Armored Citra. Give me some feedback, folks. What's everybody else thinking about the Armored Citra here? Well, I mean, Craig, next week we are doing like high alcohol beers as a theme. So if there's any time where you want to step in because I need a nap, that'd be the week. Just say it, Aaron. You've tried writing it like 5 times. Just say it out loud.
Untapped.
Untapped. Thank you. Untapped beer imports. That was very sad watching Aaron struggle with a pen that had no ink. Yeah, I also really like this Armand Citra. I think it's very pretty. The alcohol's a little lower. It's very like just a nice hop showcase. And I love, bringing in new breweries that, and this is sometimes very fun. Like we've done this a number of times. I'm gonna make Cannery work. I don't care how many bloody beer tastings I have to stick a Cannery seasonal in. I'm gonna make Cannery work, damn it, because I really like that brewery. But we did Strangefellows Brewing out of Victoria. We did a whole tasting around that, and out of that, one of the 4 beers actually stuck. The Guardian IPA actually picked up some fans. We did Yellow Dog, and the Yellow Dog tasting went over really well. It was actually a lot of fun. And out of that, the New England Pale Ale, but notably not the New England IPA, took off. So we're going to continue on with that. It seems like every time we do one of these tastings with a new brewery, one of the 4 ends up like being a huge hit and sticks around and continues to sell out of the fridge well enough that we carry on with it. And the other 3 just kind of die on the vine, and we quietly shuffle them into the mixed 4 and get rid of them that way sometimes. It's very funny when we try out a new brewery. I'd love to work more with Rainhard. It's the only beer I've had from them, but this is really good. Have I ever had Nomad from Village Brewing? No, but I had the IPA that preceded it, whose name has just gone straight out of my head. There was it was like, I think it was an India Session Lager, actually. And I actually quite liked it. I thought it was a really pretty, well done beer. I really quite enjoyed it because at that point in my life, I was going to watch a lot of hockey games with all the guys from my fantasy league at Backstreet South. It was called Village Maiden. And yeah, the only IPA, or even close to an IPA thing you could get there, was the Village Maiden. And we, like, every time we went as a table, we would just drink them out of that. And then we'd move on to other things. But like, we'd all go, we'd show up, we'd have beers, we'd drink them out of Maiden, and then we'd switch to something else. So I've drank a lot of Village IPAs, but I don't know if I've ever actually had the Nomad. Why don't you tell me about it, actually? This one has the most #mouthfeel, peaches and barley, papaya. Yeah, I think this is definitely hybrid.
It's light.
It is light, yeah. It's very sessionable. It's a little lower in alcohol at 5.2, which I appreciate. Yeah, the low alcohol Two Crows, it's either the Lies or the Lycée. Excellent beer, but yeah, it's very much in that low alcohol category. It's great for what it is, but how often do I want what it is? It's the issue of, like, I've made, the world's very greatest Kolsch. I don't care. It's Kolsch. How many times do I really leave my house and say, you know what, today I'm going to drink a Kolsch? I don't think that's ever happened. Maybe it happens to people who live in Cologne, Germany. I don't know, but Kolsch is one of those styles that just doesn't really do anything for me, which is why I think we maybe have featured one. I think we did My Best Friend's Girl when we did Establishment Week, but I also think I might have considered it and found it too boring and just said, screw it, I'm going to do something else. It's a very good Kolsch. I just really can't find myself in a position in life where I really care that desperately about Kolsch. It's like caring about ketchup or toilet paper. It's a thing that exists, and I'm grateful it exists. I just don't really care about it too intensely. All right, so next week I want to talk about the lack of a Scotch tasting. Put very simply, we had another project this week, which we'll talk about in a second. I want to make all of the beer tastings this fall something really special and really unique. I want to have a guest speaker for every single one. I want to have something really, and a guest speaker I like. I want to have, I actually had a guest speaker lined up for next week, and everything was actually a go, and I actually declined, Aaron. I I was getting just all the wrong vibes from them. So I decided actually to initially to go a different direction. And then when I couldn't find someone better on short-ish notice, I just decided not to do one. These Scotch tastings are not what we normally do. Normally the Scotch tasting is completely free. We understand, like, if you're taking stuff home, we have to charge for it, because otherwise we would not be here January 1. But I don't want this to be COVID profiteering, especially something where we've managed to offer it completely for free for the better part of 20 odd years. I want it to still maintain some of that incredible good value, homey, conversational feel that we've always had with the Scotch tastings, and not just throw them together. There have definitely been some thrown together beer tastings. I will not lie about that. There have been some very last minute beer tastings. But the Scotch tastings, it's something that, when I first started here, yes, I got brought in to drive the delivery truck because I was 18 and stupid. But, the very first thing I ever got offered any control over was the Scotch section. So I really care about the Scotch section. And then beyond that, I run the Scotch tastings basically personally for the first 10 years they existed. So I really care about those. And I really care about them being incredible value for the consumer. I care about them being the absolute highest quality. At a certain point early this week, I kind of realized that anything that I was going to put together in the amount of time I had, because I'd kind of canceled our initial speaker, wasn't going to meet the standards I wanted for it. So I just decided we're not doing one. So next Friday, we are going to take a break. Aaron and I are going to, go home, see our families, that sort of thing. Hang out on a Friday night, maybe have some beers, something cool. But we're not doing anything. There will absolutely be a Scotch tasting 2 weeks after that, but we're just going to take a week off because it's not up to the standards I demand of it. So we do, however, have a wine tasting this Friday night. I'm going to talk about that right now. So we are going to Sicily. Now that, of course, is the big, roughly triangular island off the south coast of Italy. It's right out there in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's incredibly hot, but it's also incredibly steep. It's based around a bunch of mountains and a giant volcano called Mount Etna. This is a really, really interesting wine region because it's a complete contrast. On one end, you have things like Arianna Occhipinti making these incredibly superlative terroir shows where she doesn't even tell you the grape varieties on the front of the label because it's all about those volcanic soils. On the other end, and the reason we're doing this is because it's a teachable moment, this is one of the least expensive Pinot Grigios you can get in Alberta. You can actually get this in a 3-liter bag-and-box. But for a very, very long time, this style of wine was really all you got out of Sicily. And this is also, I think, the only time we've ever had what I would call a cynically commercial wine on the channel. And I actually did want to talk about one because the process that goes into making one and how different it is from this wine is my child, you will love it or I will hate you. How different that process is to this is our Pinot Grigio. It competes very well in the $10 to $12 Pinot Grigio market. We're going to market it here, here, and here because our biggest competitor is weak in those markets. It's a very different attitude to take on winemaking, and Sicily has a really big history of making wine like that, so this was actually, to me, the right time. In the middle, Sicily has they actually have 3 major red grape varieties, none of which are actually Paracone. The biggest one is Nero d'Avola, which is, I always think of it as being a spicier high-acid Merlot, but it is really the standout red grape of Sicily, so I need to talk about it. Nerello Mascalese, I'd love to do one, but they all started about $30, so we're not doing one of those. And Paracone here, this was actually a grape variety I hadn't heard of until last month when an agent brought it in. It is a very, very ancient Sicilian grape. Even if you dig into the World Atlas of Wine or the Oxford Wine Companion, there isn't a lot of actual information on Paracone. So I've been doing quite a bit of reading on it, and it's got a really interesting little history to it. So we're going to cover that as well. So that's Sicily, 1 white, 3 reds, doing a lot of red because it is rather cold outside. Now, in a week, in a week we are going to do a beer tasting, our 31st beer tasting, because we do beer tasting every Wednesday night. And we are going to do Imperial Week. This is the big, high alcohol, chunky, powerful beer week. So, fun thing, we actually were prepping to do this event. We were prepping to do all of these beers, and there's one of the beers I hadn't had yet, and it was the beer that the Skeleton Crew is in its spot. So I said, okay, well, I know this beer and like it. I adore Warp Whistle. I got to try a little bit of the Cabin Golden Hour when I picked this up at Cabin on this past Saturday. I liked all the beers. I thought they were great, but I hadn't had, there was actually a Two Crows Aztec Stout, so a stout with like cinnamon and vanilla and chocolate and things in it. It was actually going to be our last one. And I'd had one, and I thought it was a little bit undercarbonated, and I was like, okay, well, I had it out of the fridge. We keep the fridge really cold. Maybe it's just very softly carbed, because it did say it was a nitro stout. So, okay, well, maybe we'll serve it at the end, and we'll tell everyone to take their beer out of the fridge, and it'll be fine. We cracked one at absolute, room temperature about 15 minutes before we went to air, and it was dead flat. So it was like, you know what? Cool. We're not doing that. Let's do something else. And it was the mad scramble of what do I have that's high alcohol and fits the theme, and we can do, in this tasting that I have 24 of right this second. So Skeleton Crew. AKA, I'm probably losing money on the tasting because Skeleton Crew is not cheap. But it's a Fig Newton barley wine by 88. So that's going to be super fun. It's delicious, by the way. We had 2 88 beers this week. Maybe we'll reach out to Jesse, see if Jesse will come hang out with us. That'd be fun, and they're wildly different beers. Otherwise, we have Blind Men's Wet and Dry Hop, which kind of looks like a Blind Men New England Pale Ale label that got a little wet. I think that's actually a very fun way to look at it. And then finally, we have the Cabin Golden Hour, which is kind of their version of Duvel. So big, high alcohol, powerful beers. That should be a lot of fun. Nobody's driving home after that one, but that's all right. We don't generally drive home after these anyway. So, away we go. I'm sure we've had some comments. And I have a little bit of beer to drink before we get on to the last one. So we'll go through the comments here real fast. Yellow looks so good. I'm going to do a tasting for the Warp Whistle. Yes, we just talked about that. I need to be 9.5, very bitter, piney. Yeah, they all do kind of taste a little bit Christmas tree-ish. It's very piney. It's a distinct note. Chad, you're not wrong that the Red Racer is the truest to what I would say is like a classical, old-school West Coast IPA. I think that's very fair. I also think that the West Coast IPA style needs to evolve, and it needs to change, and it needs to be more in this style. But we'll talk about that in that long. Still have a bit of beer in my glass and some comments to get through. I did say I'd never have a barley wine on because they're too expensive. And then I got into a position where I was about to go live on camera and announce the beer tasting. Actually, it was right before we shot the promo for it, and the beer was flat. It was too late to order something different. So it was, what do I have that fits the theme and I have at least 24 of in the building? I guess it's going to be Skeleton Crew. Yes, that makes sense.
1 and 4:30 is the best time to deliver.
And yes, I almost forgot. Let's talk about the Advent. So, this isn't actually the box we're going to use for the Advent. This is a wine box. We're also going to have a Christmas case, but we'll get to that at a much later date, 2 weeks from now. Yes, we've decided that because absolutely no one is doing a damned Advent calendar this year, we're just going to jump in. And yes, we're copying another store in Calgary called Bricks, but that's neither here nor there. We're going to do our own Advent calendar. It's not going to be the classiest thing in the world. We are going to wrap it in wrapping paper like this. It's going to look sharp enough, but, if you've watched any of our videos, you know we're not exactly a big budget operation. But we're going to make the nicest advent calendar that we can make. And what it lacks in terms of packaging, well, here's the thing. We're picking all the beers. And they're all 473s. And we're going to sell it for 120 bucks. And it's going to include a whole bunch of things that no one else in their right mind would put in an advent calendar. So it's going to have IPAs. It's going to have sours. It's going to have dark beers. We actually did spend quite a bit of time on this. We tried to achieve a balance so it wasn't too IPA heavy. My bias. It wasn't too dark beer heavy. It didn't, completely cut out things like a good cream ale or a good Kolsch or a good Helles. It's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit Alberta focused because our store is a little Alberta focused, but it's exactly the sort of advent calendar that you would expect me to build. It's 24 beers in a box for $120, all of which are different, and they will be numbered, and they're going to be really, really fun. We are spending all of tomorrow making them. Actually, we had a 4-person team today cutting apart pack techs. Cutting apart these things, specifically every white one of these that we had in the store, because we're going to write the number on it, and that's how we're going to do the advent calendar. Is it the most high-tech solution? No, but it'll do, and there's absolutely no advent calendars, and I love advent calendars, so we're doing one. We're all going to take a turn at the wrapping table. Eric, Nigel is going to hate wrapping, and nobody wants to make 30 or 40 of these. It's not fun. I've done my share of wrapping in 20 years at this store. It's not great. Everybody's going to get a turn at wrapping. And we're going to start with 12 of them. We're going to see how it goes. But yes, we are making our own. They are going to heavily feature breweries that we really like. If I had the notes in front of me, I would be able to tell you how many. But I want to say, in fact, I can tell you how many. There's 24 beers in the case.
Okay, well, I have a note right here. It's being golden and so and
There are 20. No, there can't be 20. There are.
you're welcome. Have a nice night.
There are 18 breweries in the case. I'm pretty sure. Know all the things. We really did have a lot of laughs about we should just put in all the things as Christmas Eve, but no, that would be evil and awful. No, there is no all the things. I'm stuck with that beer till the end of time. That is not going in the advent calendar. And Kevin, yes, please. We actually do need more of those white pack techs because, yeah, 4 of us spent the better part of half an hour cutting them up and we still don't have enough. For reference, like 12 advent calendars at 24 each is going to require 288 single pack tech lids to actually make them. So, yeah, we need a lot of white lids. That's probably going to be the limiting factor on how many of these we can actually make. Scotty, I'm not going to tell you if I've skipped a Fat Tug and a Kolsch because the point of an advent calendar is to be surprised. But if you are absolutely insistent that you would like one and don't want a Kolsch or a Fat Tug in there, whether or not there is any Kolsch or Fat Tug in there, I can take or potentially not take it out of there. See, I can be good at surprises and actually, make you one custom if that's what you'd like. That would be no problem.
That's cute.
So when can we get the advent calendars? We are making them all tomorrow. But which I mean, we're making 12 tomorrow because, December 1st is in, by the time we're open tomorrow morning, 11 days. So we don't exactly have all the time in the world to sell these. So we're gonna start with 12. And if we sell all of them, we're going to make 12 more. We kind of have to make them because most of the beers are in 4-packs, so we kind of have to make them 4 at a time. I don't know if I'm going to sell 8 and have to tear down 4 of them, or I'm going to sell 40. I have absolutely no idea. But I've had enough requests for advent calendars, and I've been sufficiently unhappy with the quality of advent calendars / the complete unavailability this year of advent calendars that I had to do something. And this is what we've decided to do. Full credit, by the way, it was not my idea, any of the ideas like the white pack tech. I was moaning that, you know, making our own advent calendar would be too hard. It was actually everyone except me here who came up with the entire concept of putting this together. This was Mike and Corey and Devin and Nigel. They actually developed the whole thing. So I actually got this whole idea put on my desk and was like, well, yeah, that's genius. We have to do it. So I can take no credit on this one. Okay.
Staff are the best.
My staff really are the best. So let's talk about Seasons Pass. So West Coast IPA, this is a cabin beer. The one thing I'll say right off the hop, I get more sweetness on this than I was expecting. I don't know if that's a cabin stylistic thing, or if that's just after the orange Citra and the fat tug, I was expecting a little more dryness. But it is, you know, clear for cabin. We're yeah, the metallic Sharpie on black lid was actually discussed. Just reading through the comments here, folks. Yeah, absolutely. I will sign everybody who asks in the comments up for a advent calendar. Apparently, we're gonna have to make more than 12 because yeah, we've apparently done very well off the just talking about it tonight. Thank you all, by the way, because they're not gonna be, you know, a small amount of trouble to make, but a lot of love went into them, and a lot of debate about which beers to go into them. So it's been a lot of fun putting them together. And some of these beers, there actually is a very limited amount of. There's a lot of seasonals in there and very limited run beers. So after the initial run of 12, the next round might actually look a little bit different. So Season Pass in context. The bitterness is certainly there. It's a good deal more bitter than, say, Super Saturation. I would actually say, and I said this on the channel before, that Sunshine Rain is actually my favorite of Cabin's core beers, much ahead of Super Sat. I really like Sunshine Rain. This reminds me almost of a slightly more piney and resiny version of Sunshine Rain. And thank you all so much for bringing in the white lids, because that is very much the limiting factor for us. Because I do want them to look nice. So, ooh. Now, let's just go the historic versus the modern here. That's changed. That's changed dramatically in how it presents in the mouth, from being very bittersweet to being quite dry but perceptibly bitter. This has gone from being kind of your typical old school IPA notes of pine, citrus, big grapefruit, to being a little bit of tropical fruit. Some really pretty like cereal grain notes that I'm kind of struggling to get away from. I really like the malt bill on this. Yes, there's definitely pine and grapefruit here, but there's a lot of other prettier, more lifted things as well, and I quite like that. And yeah, it is interesting how sweet it is. I'm very curious, like, is that just Cabin's style that they like doing sweeter IPAs? Because I'll be honest, that does, now that I think about it, that does seem to be a bit of a thing with Cabin. They're definitely sweeter than Establishment's IPAs. I'd say they're about as sweet as 88's, but Wave Pool is drier than this. Annex, I would think, I haven't had Force Majeure in bloody ages, but I've had Meets and Bounds and Forward Progress in the last little while. I'd say they're both drier than this. The Blind Man's drier than this, I think, although it's been ages since I've had a Long Shadows, because I usually have either the River Session or the New England Pale, which is odd because Long Shadows is my favorite beer, or my favorite Blind Man beer at least. But you never see it anywhere. You always get offered the NEPA or the Blind Man River Session. So if I'm having a Blind Man, I'm usually having it out. And yeah, you never see the Long Shadows. Seasons Pass is your contender for Dial-Up. Wow, now don't get me wrong, I like Seasons Pass, but Dial-Up's head and shoulders my IPA of the year. I loved that beer. Pretty sure, in fact, I know we're sold out of it, unfortunately. I only know because Warp Whistle took its spot and it's in the same part of the fridge. Lid's looking nice. Black and white alternating. Black and white alternating is an interesting idea. I like that. We could do that. That couldn't be that hard. That's actually very fun. It'd look a little bit like a checkerboard. And then we could do just black marker on white caps, and I assume you can buy a white marker. That's a thing, right? Like some sort of grease pencil?
Paint.
Paint?
Paint pen.
Paint pen?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently that is a thing.
Yep.
Also, I'm bad at pens, apparently. And that's what I'm kind of getting at. Yeah, Chad's comment about mashing it at a higher temperature to achieve the sweetness, because it's not very dark. And yeah, I'm curious where the sweetness comes from. It doesn't seem as attenuated. It doesn't seem as fermented all the way through. But yeah, I'm as curious as Eric here, and I flatly don't have an answer for you folks. It's not as attenuated. That's the technical tasting note. It's sweeter. Why? It's not caramelized malt. Chad, could you maybe talk us through like how mashing at a higher temp achieves that sweetness? Because I'm very curious about that. And I will go back to Red Racer after this, because you're right, that's actually a really cool thing to try. Happy to consult on all pen-related matters. Thank you. Thank you, Megan. Oh, wow, that's absolutely apples and oranges, isn't it? The Red Racer seemed very lifted and very pretty initially. I mean, not compared to more modern IPAs, but it still seemed very, bright and fresh and juicy. Now it's just pine for days. I mean, there's grapefruit there, but it's way, way down. That Red Racer IPA is just so wildly different from the cabin, and that's just... Okay, they keep saying 2015, but that's 15 years of growth to me, because I'm saying 2005. And they're just ludicrously different.
Curious.
Yeah. All right. I think we can... oh, I actually got an answer from Chad. Thank you, 30-second video delay. I'm glad I actually got it. Warm the mash temp, the longer strand sugars it creates so the yeast can... That makes sense. So it's creating its own complex sugars. That's really interesting. I like that.
Curious.
All right. I think we'll wrap it there, Aaron.
Order.
Oh, order. Ooh, yeah, order's a good call. I'm going to wait on a limb and thoroughly annoy Chad. I'm going to say Fat Tug 1. I'm going to go Armed and Citra 2. I am going to go Seasons Past 3, and I'm going to go Red Racer 4. I really respect it for what it is, and of every one of these beers, I have drank more Red Racer probably by an order of magnitude than all of these combined, because I love Red Racer, always have. It's something that was an absolute staple in my fridge throughout my 20s and late 20s, early 30s. Like, it was always around. I really like Red Racer. So, yeah, I'm going to go Fat Tug, Armed and Citra, Season Pass, and then the Red Racer. I just found this really sweet, and it's a bit of a tough lineup. I know we say that every week. Well, not the All the Things week. That was not a tough lineup at all. But no, I feel like it kind of belongs there. I really liked it. 4321, 4321. Wow, nobody likes me. That's fair. 3421, 3241. Okay. Yep. Terry's on the same side. The order started as, sorry, I should say, the order was this initially.
Right.
That was the original order. Sorry, Aaron. What's your order?
2143.
2143. You didn't like the Armed and Citra?
Didn't love it.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
didn't punch
It's interesting.
me, like, in this tasting anyway. I think I liked it, but the rest were so bold it was hard to like. It kind of just like lost.
Does anyone want to not rate the Red Racer dead last? Not that I'm encouraging anyone to do so, because if that's your rating, that's your rating. But I don't know. I'm sure there are lots of people like me who remember it perhaps more fondly than it drinks now. But it was also a very... Okay, that's a point that I actually wrote down in my notes when I was putting this together. Did I set this beer up to fail? A little bit. West Coast IPA is a style that has evolved, and that was one of the concepts I wanted to explore here, is how did this beer style change, you know, the early days versus kind of the height of West Coast hype to the horrifying desert that is the Ontario craft beer scene, to a West Coast IPA by a brewery basically that paid its bills and built its reputation on doing East Coast. I mean, we've really gone on a big journey here. I don't think we can really criticize the Red Racer and say, well, you know, yes, it was my least favorite. Sure. But, I mean, this was hands down the best IPA on the market all day long when it came out. It was an absolute sensation. And now things have changed. And I think that was what I wanted to explore with this. I realized I didn't cover that much history. This was very much more a personal exploration. But I was very curious to see how much things had changed. How much Red Racer IPA versus the Seasons Pass IPA. And let's be clear, like if you came into Alberta on a flight from Florida, you know, back when that's, you know, when that's a thing again, and you saw Red Racer IPA, West Coast IPA versus the Cabin versus the Fat Tug, and they all said West Coast IPA, what a wildly different experience you're going to get, not knowing that insider knowledge, that local history of this is what these beers are and why they are that way. On the shelf, you know, they're Coke and Pepsi, but when you really dig into them, there's so much more to that than that. All right.
Nice.
I think we'll call it there, Aaron.
Cool.
Thank you very much for doing this, Aaron.
Hey, thanks to you too.
Cheers. Yeah, I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton. That's Aaron. This was our West Coast, Best Coast IPA tasting. I hope you had as much fun as I did. We will see you on Friday for Sicily. We will see you on Wednesday next week for Imperial Week. And we will not see you on Friday because I just couldn't put it together in time. Have a wonderful night, everyone, and take care.